This is Pacey. This is Ron.
We're pantomiming them.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our Genie seminar. This is May the 12th, 2019. This is our Genie seminar, and you all are aware that this is being recorded. And anything you say, you're giving us permission that it will be available for the public, and we're consenting that that will be okay. We wish everybody a happy Mother's Day, and we're going to continue with the theme that we had started, the idea of the story of us. We had one of the leading people who has been a pioneer in promoting the idea of evolution. Evolution was fairly recently introduced, just about 150 years ago. For 3.5 billion years, there was no story of us. There was no language, there were no people, no creatures with words. And it wasn't until about 50,000 years ago that we developed language. It was about 2 million years ago, supposedly, we developed our human brain, the beginning of our cortex. And then at just about 50,000 years ago, we developed the use of language. And then not until just 150 years ago that we developed our new story. So what were the first stories? Think about the early stories when people were first beginning to communicate using words. And a lot of the early stories had to do with magic and superstition. How would people understand the meaning of thunder, for example, or lightning? How would we explain death? And even simple things like rainbows, for example. How would we begin to understand that an act that we did in a few minutes created something 9 months later, the process of birth? I wonder if our early ancestors really understood what was happening when they're biologically engaged in procreation, that at least for the human it took 9 months, and for some creatures much even longer, that people would understand an act that we did today would lead to something in the future, other than just whatever our instincts told us. So it was only about 150 years ago that we developed a new story. And so think of all the other stories, the first stories that had to do with magic and superstition. People worship trees. We had all kinds of idols. We had, how many gods did we have? And I think how many gods do we have even in some of our religions today? I mean, how many gods, for example, in the Indian religion? Sharik, do you have any idea?
1 million.
About 1 million gods. So it's been quite a while before we got to the point where somebody said that maybe there's one God. And we're not even sure that's true or accurate, but at least we've gone through a period where most people hold there's one God. And then we've created other kinds of stories that the one God seems to, you know the more up-to-date stories that most people seem to believe in, that there's one God who happens to be favors a certain religion or a certain political party or a certain country, and magically intervenes from time to time. And kind of the popular ideas that in order to get what we want in life, we have to be nice to this God. We have to obey these commandments. And the way we often get some rewards is by praying, by prayer. And we usually ask for things, and we often bargain. We have the idea that if we do a little bargaining, that will help us to get benefits. So we've come from a lot of different stories. And now when this Barbara Marx Hubbard, who recently passed away, she was a pioneer in the new story. And the interesting thing about the new story that I think is critical for our discussion is her new story of evolution is that we have been provided a special organ, a cerebral cortex, which we've been calling a Genie organ. A Genie organ because Genie organ if you remember the story of the genie, it grants us wishes when we free the genie from the bottle. When we free the genie from instinct and tradition, the genie organ has the ability to grant us wishes. And if we if we understand something about our past, we can use our knowledge that we've acquired to grant virtually unlimited wishes. So the new message is that instead of simply bargaining to receive what we want, the newer message I think that evolution suggests to us, and Barbara Marx Hubbard's message, is that we have been given whatever this creative force that many people call God, some people call nature, whatever that force is, we have been given the ability to create our future. That's a rather remarkable new idea, a newer way of thinking, that whatever we are doing in the world, we have created much of this. So what this means essentially is if we have pollution on this world, we have global warming, if we have nuclear weapons, who has created this? We who are through this special organ we've done it because we have the ability to be creators. And if we can create these negative things, why can't we also use our energy to create positive things? And what are the positive things that we can create? And here most of the ideas, we can elevate ourselves from being a creature of our past, basically a high-level animal, so that we can elevate ourselves to, instead of being high-level animals or human beings, we can make ourselves humane becomings. This is a new word of introducing into the language. So the idea is that the words that we've introduced initially were words that taught us to do what worked in the past. And now Einstein is telling us that we have the ability to use language and use words to create what we choose in the past. Our creator, or our first cause or uncaused cause, has given us the ability to create our own future if we teach ourselves the correct language, the correct words. And I think that's the critical issue. Can we develop a newer way of thinking that enables us to predict our future if we have an accurate story? And the accurate story is, as has been introduced now with only 150 years ago, that we were not just created in a day 6,000 years ago, but we started off as a single cell with the opportunity to multiply, to become more in number, to become more sophisticated. That's the second quality, to become more sophisticated. And the third quality, which is the most interesting from my perspective, was that we were given the ability to direct our energy to the next higher level of complexity. So here's the key message here. So we started off as single cells, and we developed a form of directing our energy to our identical self, and we call that directing that energy love. We gave it a word, we call it egotistical love. We love ourselves when we create our identical selves. In the next stage of evolution, which took a long time, we developed a variation from our identical self, an offspring or family. So then we developed parental love or familial or family love, a new form of unconditional love, directing our energy to the next level. And then as we developed families of families, we developed tribes, we developed tribal love. We directed our energy to the benefit of the unconditional love of the tribe. And we see that in every animal, so to speak. And then somewhere along in our new story, something else happened. Instead of being bisexual, having the sexes, both sexes in one organism, as we became so complicated, we had to divide so that one gender became masculine and the other became feminine. The masculine side developed muscles to have power and create seeds. So we know males create millions of seeds every day, and developed the ability to spread the seed and protect offspring. The feminine energy, on the other hand, acquired the ability to be the creator of life. So developed the ability to be nurturing and to have the instinct or built into their DNA, the ability to nurture offspring to reproductive age. So now we've got two different sexes. So we have another kind of love, which we call erotic love. So you see the progression from egotistical love to family love, or familiar or parental love, to tribal love, and then now to erotic love. So we have four kinds of love, and they are all built into our DNA. And what the new story is telling us is that we have this new organ, this Genie organ, that can decide to create love ourselves rather than have it just built into us, be inherited. We have the ability, if we know something about our history, have an accurate history, we can predict our future. If we understand something about our past, and here's, I think, probably the most powerful thing. If we understand our trajectory, have a true understanding of where we've come from to our present, we have the ability to predict the future. And if we can predict the future, we can add prevention to trial and error. So instead of learning by making mistakes, which, for example, we do when we learn to walk, we make mistakes, we learn to walk, we can anticipate the future if we have an accurate history. Why is this important? Because instead of learning by trial and error, which we've done for 3.5 billion years, and this is the message from Einstein, if we can predict our history, our future from our history, we have the ability to prevent what we don't want to happen. And Einstein's message was, we have the ability now, because we can create, we've learned how to harness the energy of the sun, we have the ability to create weapons that are so powerful that there is no opportunity to learn by trial and error anymore. If we create these weapons and release them en masse, there is no second chance. And that was his most brilliant gift to us, his statement, that we can learn now by prevention if we understand something about our history and we realize that that we have to do something ahead of time and not just learn by trial and error, by emotion. So that's the story. Now we mentioned, I'm going to finish with just this one last story that we mentioned previously. In January of 2018, for 38 minutes, we remember in Hawaii, the bomb went off, or not, rather the emergency alert system went on for 38 minutes. And it said, there is a nuclear attack on the way, and we have a limited time, do what you can to protect yourself. And then ended up over and over with, this is not a false alarm. Now, what happened at that time? What would you do in that situation? What actually happened is people began to bargain with God. They began to say, a lot of prayer, I will do anything, I'll give up anything if we could stop this bomb. I'll give up my money. People at that time were not calling their bank. They were not calling their hairdresser. They were not concerned about the usual things they were doing during the day. They were bargaining with to do something different than they had done. Some people were, also people were putting children in sewers. People were putting their cars under bridges. And the other thing that you would probably think of doing would be calling your loved ones and saying goodbye. That was a common thing. Ask yourself, what would you do in that situation if the alarm went off? And the point that I'm trying to make here is that when we became aware of the truth of the day, that we're in a situation where we could have this happen any moment, all of a sudden we change our behavior and we begin to ask for, we begin to think about what we can do to prevent something. But other than that, we spend most of our time, I would say, being more interested in making money or the material, physical things that we've learned from the past. And now the question is it possible that instead of forgetting about all this, can we think about this situation in Hawaii and say, why is it that we forget about, we have no means right now, no sensible means to prevent this predictable event. Instead, we spend most of our time in mad mutual assured destruction. The 9 countries that have created weapons of mass destruction are building more bombs, spending more money, and we spend very little time and energy on figuring out what we can do to prevent this. We don't have prevention. So that's what I'm just thinking, sharing these ideas to get us thinking a little bit about our life situation. Why is it that we spend most of our time on material, physical things rather than mental, spiritual things, which most people say has to do with our 4 qualities: happiness, enough, love, and peace, rather than money, fame, and physical things. So sorry if I'm rambling a little bit, but it's a little bit difficult to bring these ideas together, and I'm struggling with that. But I'm going to pass the torch to the talking stick over here and see if you can relate to any of these ideas.
I have two thoughts. One is, I think no matter how we approach it, we are still learning by trial and error. I think, whether it's trial and error in our physical world or in our cognitive world, I don't know that there are a lot of choices, given that we are sentient beings that have memory. I think that is the way that we learn. So I think you're suggesting there, and I agree with you, there are other ways to learn besides physical experience and trial and error. So I don't think this model changes the nature of the way we learn or that we will learn. I think I'm not sure that there is a way of learning other than by trial and error. The alternative being faith or belief, which is a little different than learning. The issue that you mentioned that happened in Hawaii was actually a very good example of learning by trial and error. We learn something about ourselves and our species, is that in the moment, when there's a threat, people are very, remorseful and want to change. But, when the threat goes away, we're back to business as usual pretty quickly. And I think there's something to be learned from that. There's something to be learned from knowing that about ourselves, and maybe how should that inform the way we go about this project. If we're trying to get people to anticipate a bad outcome and behave differently in the long run, we have one experiment in the recent past that took that experiment to the maximum. They convinced the whole island, the whole community, that it was happening in 30 minutes. And I don't know that that was a very effective method of learning. I'm not sure that how much has changed as a result of that trial and error experience. And if that really, if you look at that, or I guess I look at that as a failure of learning, does that inform the way we should be going about this project and to get people to change their behavior?
I think I got a couple of comments as well. I think it's a challenge, when, if there's some view that there is logical thought and rationality, and I think it was persuasion. How do you persuade somebody that I've looked at this evidence, I've looked at this history, and because of this Genie cortex, I should be able to, if I get an accurate view of the past, I should be able to get a good trajectory of what the future is going to bring. Which I think, a lot of science kind of reemphasizes that, and science has some amazing things. But I just think in the political realm, that's that idea of how do you develop consensus? How do you decide, based on history, what conclusion you draw from history that might take us forward? I just think that that's not a trivial problem, that a lot of people look at the same evidence and come up with different explanation and different history. And, I think that's becoming, more fragmented, that there seems to be, more people who sort of believe that, the people on the right think that they're correct and other people are wrong, and do a lot of things to reinforce that, and likewise from the left. So I think that it's not a trivial problem when you say we can look at the past to predict the future. That kind of says there's some sort of language, or there's some sort of willingness for people to, or capability for people to look at a set of facts and agree on what they're actually seeing. And that element of how do you make a persuasive argument, how do you make a statement, or how do you convince somebody that your way of looking at history is accurate and does provide a launch pad for figuring how things will change into the future. To me, that's still a pretty good challenge, and I think the challenge is getting more difficult rather than less difficult.
There was an article in the New York Times, might have been this morning, about this plane in Russia that was landed and was on fire. And people were told to get out of the plane and not to take anything, just get out. And what happened was a lot of the people near the front started getting their luggage, their handbags, out from the overhead compartments. And a lot of people in the back couldn't get out in time and were killed by the fire. And the writer talks about people just sort of lapsing into habit and not really thinking about what they were doing to endanger the people in the back of the plane by stopping it. If you can remember getting a plane unloaded, how long it takes, how you have to wait when people start fumbling around for their luggage. And under most circumstances, you just wait. But this was life and death. And people couldn't seem to get out of their habit pattern. I'm sure people were thinking about important papers or whatever they had in that luggage. And often you carry in hand luggage the stuff that you don't want to get lost. But I thought that was an interesting example of how habit takes over in a destructive way, either to yourself or other people. And how would you anticipate that? How could you, there were loudspeakers were saying, do not get your luggage, exit immediately. But everybody didn't do it, but enough people did it that it wasn't safe for the others. And I'm not sure how you deal with that.
I think it's a very generous interpretation to say that that was the result of habit. I maybe I have a more pessimistic view of humanity, but I think people thought more of their own stuff than the people behind them. They thought, I can get my stuff and get out. My paper's important to me, and I've got enough time, and I'm going to get my stuff. I think they weren't thinking about as much as the other people. I think that's a very difficult species to try to save, or a very difficult species to try to teach to save itself. I heard that same story, and one thought I had as a solution might be that, when you're put your stuff in the overhead bin, that it's announced at the end of the flight that's locked up, that's not accessible until the plane's safely on the ground, and to tell people to not give people the choice to say, or 30 minutes into the flight, we're going to open up the bins again and you can get anything that you need. But as a rule, these aren't going to be available because we've seen that in a pinch, you're going to get your stuff even if we tell you not to. So that would be one way in Pacey's dictatorial view of the earth to solve the problem.
One thing, Pacey, as human beings, we are always, we pay more attention to the negative things around us, and I will blame the news and the media. So a lot of things go good on a daily basis. A lot of things are good, but somehow the bad things that happen, the politics, the bomb blasts, the gunshots, all of those get the front page attention, and we are all surrounded by this 24/7, the phone, the notifications, the news, whenever you open the TV. You did a great help to me last year when you offered to check up my mom because she was facing some problem. I never even asked you. You were having a conversation and you agreed. So for a person who claims to be so pessimistic about life being so good, then those of us who are optimistic must be saints, right?
Well, you have to remember that as far as our media is concerned nowadays, you can't make any money with good news. And I'm living proof of this. Because in my current media capacity, I won't deal with the media dido that if it bleeds, it leads. I don't do it anymore. I leave that to terrestrial media, and I try to report only things that I think are beneficial in terms of public affairs and public knowledge to folks. But I grew up, as I think many in this meeting did, with a media that we relied on and believed in for important information, and that's completely gone because it's really gone down a very much a tabloid rat hole nowadays. So there's that. And the other thing I'm gleaning from our conversation thus far today is to not fly anymore commercially and to stay out of Hawaii.
I think the role of uncertainty, this is where I was getting at, how do you know, from history, what do you draw that informs? And a great part of it is a great deal of uncertainty on what is there. I think, you can kind of look at the people in, I guess it's Russia, that were all grabbing their things and going. And, in that case, that one instance, that seemed to cost a lot of people their lives. But I think that from history, in most cases when somebody says, well, you better go do what I say, you better leave right away, and here's the protocol. And most people who don't follow it, there is no consequence. One out of many, many, many times, it is a problem. But in most cases, it really doesn't make that much difference if somebody gets the bag out or does not. And I think that's part of the issue is that, when you kind of decide that, they told me that I should move away right away. But, just like a lot of people, when the big hurricane comes, there's this sort of feeling that, well, they said I should pack up all my things and move and board my house up. And it doesn't always require, there's not really always a big hurricane. And you really don't always have had to have packed your stuff up and moved away. And those people who did move away, there's a kind of thinking that, well, that might have been kind of a waste of time. And those people who didn't, are saying, well, see, these people don't know what they're talking about. And, I think that the threat is legitimate, but that area of, is it really legitimate, or is it, somebody just overreacting? That's the space that makes it difficult to draw a conclusion that, well, it's obvious that, based on history or based on these mental scenarios that I run through my head, what's actually going to happen. That level of confidence that this is what's going to happen, just for human beings, it's not there, and you end up with this problem of, it's difficult to sort of say, if I just look clearly at the past, I will be able to see what human nature is and how things are going to move into the future. And I'm not, that's a tough bridge, because a lot of people look at the past, and there is dealing with uncertainty, and how people deal with uncertainty is quite a bit different. And it becomes possibly difficult to try to convince folks that there is, one conclusion based on the evidence behind us.
It's Josephine. I'm on the phone today, so sorry. Okay, so two things I'm hearing. I want to go back to something Pacey said earlier about we only learn through trial and error. I think we learn some things through trial and error. I think other things we learn from trusted sources. I think we learn from our leaders, and I think we learn from people in authority that give us instruction. So what I'm relating it back to something you're saying, Abby, if we're trained on the airline to buckle our seatbelts when we sit down, that's what we'll do. If the instructions are now, and they may change based on that Russia accident, where they now say in the instructions in the beginning, not only do you buckle your seatbelt and where they put their flotation devices, but in case of emergency, do not touch overhead bins, right? I think it's training. I don't think it's always trial and error. And for something as important as global warming and nuclear holocaust, we need our leaders to step up and take the position that this is not what we want for the human race. And we don't need the world to be destroyed to learn from trial and error. So those are my comments.
I think I agree with you, Josephine. I think that maybe a different way to phrase it is, if what we're looking at, if what we're interested in is behavior, how we behave, it seems to me there's kind of two roads that take us there. Trial and error is one road that takes us there. And the other is belief or faith. And I think what you're referring to is whether it's God or a boss or someone we trust, we're willing to take a certain leap of faith to get us to that place where we change our behavior and how we act. And in other circumstances, we rely on our own experience. So I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. I think we do both of them, but they're both means to an end. And I think that there's something to be learned from the trial and error happening that took place in Hawaii. That even I don't know personally how the people who actually experienced that, how they're behaving now. I haven't been aware, it hasn't been in the news that they're really behaving or anything is very qualitatively different. But I think from an observational point of view, everyone, we were all aware of that. I don't know that our trial and error by proxy, looking at what happened, I don't have the sense that that's really affected many people. So to the degree that other than personal trial and error, it may not be as powerful a method as we think. And that may be why we, fall so much back on faith. That's encompassed by religion. Religion says, yeah, you don't believe in trial and error. You believe in what I tell you. don't murder your neighbor because you're going to get in jail. Don't murder your neighbor because it's written on those 10 tablets, and you should just believe me, but that's a bad thing. Still, a lot of people murder their neighbor. So anyway, I don't think those two ideas are mutually exclusive.
I'm glad I don't live next door to you.
It points up a fact that that it's a dismal proposition that there are people in our world, in our culture, that are not reachable, that live on the outskirts of authority deliberately. I mean, I can't fathom, absent alcohol or drugs or any other impairments to rational thinking, being a jerk on an airplane. I mean, I've never once had a problem on a flight because I wouldn't even dream of second guessing the authority on a commercial airliner. But there are people who do. I call them, and it seems to happen more and more. If it isn't happening more and more, if it's at the same level it's always been, it's simply that we have a more transparent culture nowadays with everybody videoing everything that we're able to, and with fast transmission of digital technology, we're able to see more of this. But I don't know how you reach people such as this, and I don't know how you you connect with them to transmit the message that this is wrong and it's a problem for everybody. And I mean, there is a corollary between this and what we were just saying a moment ago about thou shalt not and all the other thou shalt nots that are breached every day. Religion doesn't reach all of those people. Religion reaches the people who are responsive, obviously, to religion. But beyond that, the message evaporates.
Let's go back to the story of us again for a moment. What can we learn from the story of us? When we're born, we have an animal brain that, think of it as a museum of all the things that worked in the past for the last 3.5 billion years, before we had language. Before we had language, the brain could only process information into two categories: us or them, good or bad, right or wrong. And in our past, the way we had to solve difficulties when we were competing for limited resources was basically by harmful confrontation or war. So if our animal brain, you see, is born thinking of the most negative things, we had to have a very powerful fight or flight response. The innate response in all of us that we've learned that it's in our DNA, are the impulse to be fight, to be antagonistic to people who want to take our things, or to run away and hide. We learn to think. Our animal brain is born with a museum that anticipates the worst thing in the world. And to be part of a tribe, in order to survive, we had to be identified with tribe. We see that in virtually all species. Wolves travel together, whales, sharks, whatever, we travel together with our particular tribe. But that is what we've learned from the past. And then we said, we started to develop a language. What are the language we developed? The language we developed was now tribal language. This is the critical point here. The language we developed was either or words. My tribe or your tribe, my religion or your tribe. My flag is the right flag. My religion is the right flag. Examples, we see that for 200 years, the popes gave indulgence for people to go and kill Muslims. We've basically, our leaders basically use words, the words that we've created to influence people to kill others. You know, our history is a series of wars. So we are born with, as high-level animals. It takes many, many years before we develop a language, the ability to process information. And the insight, again, I go back to Einstein because he had given us so much, is that what's unique is our ability to use imagination, to create stories where we can make mistakes in our mind. So here's where we make trial and error. We make mistakes in our mind, but we don't put them into common usage. That's when we can decide what would be the appropriate thing to do after we've made many mistakes. So imagination gives us the ability, if we have an accurate story, only if we have an accurate story, to come up with a more appropriate solution. And that's what prevention is. Prevention is the scientific method. It's when we can say, when A leads to B, and we can understand that consistently. So the bottom line here is we have a language that we've been given that basically keeps us as high-level animals. And until we develop a newer language, newer words, we're going back to our word switches, our 7 word switches and our love creation skills, until we teach ourselves a newer way of new words that enable us to solve problems in our head that are both and rather than either. Remember that word both and. It says we're united or related rather than antagonistic or separate. So as long as we think the way we've been thinking, and that's the language we have, we will continue to do this. That was the message. We have an understanding of why we have shooters. Einstein told us the world is no different than it was before. It's just that before we fought people with teeth and sticks and stones and fists. Today, if you give everybody AK-17s or 15s or whatever they are, instead of using fists, we will use the weapons we have today. So we've spent most of our resources trying to be more powerful. And today, one of the ways we are more powerful is by money. So we begin to worship weapons, we begin to worship money and physical things. And the message is, until we can teach ourselves a newer way of thinking, where we have that meme, what's good for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future. So it's, what we don't realize is that we are addicted to this way of thinking in our DNA from the museum we've inherited. And there's every reason to understand why we think of negative. And what religion has done is it has taught us, it has given us the 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill and so on. But we're still very tribal. We're still responding to our emotions rather than our common sense, or rather than to our universal sense. Our universal sense is that we can teach ourselves the importance of unconditional love rather than tribal love. So to me, that's the critical thing. As long as we have the language that we have, and we don't realize this, as long as our words have to do with flags and money, and these are the things that represent what was important to our animal brain. What's good for me for here and now, and that includes mostly power. But wisdom is when we can understand something about our past and predict what the future might be. So now we can engage in prevention, all using trial and error in by our imagination. We have the ability to think in a way that we solve problems, but it means we have to get out of our comfort zone. What we've inherited is telling us, you must do what worked in the past. And what worked in the past was you have to be prepared to protect yourself, to have stronger weapons, and to be prepared to be part of your tribe and be part of your flag or whatever. And that's what we're seeing in today's behavior. That's the critical thing. That's why we started off our meetings with 7 word switches, the powerful words that enable us to elevate our way of thinking to what's good for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future. But we're still thinking, when we're getting off that plane, we're thinking what's good for me and my family for here and now. Forget about later. When we're in that situation in Hawaii, all of a sudden we're come to realize there's something about tomorrow, not just today. When we're suddenly confronted with this is real and the bomb is going to go off, that's when we start deciding it's time to start bargaining again. I'll give up my money, I'll give up all the other things, I'll do anything just to stop the bomb. And that's when we get involved, of course, in prayer. And that's the most common way we deal in many ways is through prayer. And the message of the new way, the new message of the new news is that that whoever this creative force is, we've been given the ability that we are the leaders. We have the ability to solve the problem. As long as we keep looking for the authority up there, out there, whether it's our president or whether it's our whoever that's going to tell us what to do, it's us. We have the ability to create our own future if we decide to get beyond what emotionally we've been taught and begin to say what makes sense as we use our rational thinking rather than just follow all the old museum pieces that we were born with.
I'm going to argue that we actually have learned from the Hawaii incident. You know, you can argue that we haven't stopped exactly what we've been doing and then taken a step up and now changing the way we're doing things based on that one piece of information. You know, we haven't changed that dramatically, but we all are thinking about it. We're actually talking about it on Sunday morning, and I think we're using it as an example of what is an imagined possibility that had it not happened, you know, we wouldn't have something that concrete to think about. And so I'm, you know, things happen slowly, but you can argue it won't happen fast enough. But I would say that we probably have been quite informed by that Hawaiian incident, and you know, we are a bit smarter as a species potentially because of that news traveling around.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have been informed, and I think the Hawaiians have been informed. And I think in New York, we were informed by 9/11, and being here, I think it impacted us, you know, a lot more than it may have impacted some of the other people who are not at the epicenter. So I do think they're informed. But I do think we need, you know, Don, I do think we need leaders. I think people, and I say this in the most caring way, I think people are sheep, and we need guidance, and we need people to help us elevate our thinking, you know, help us think about kinder ways, smarter ways to think, so that we don't rely on our innate behaviors to experiment and touch the fire, you know, to get burned, to learn the lesson, right? We should just listen to the leaders or listen to the people we trust, whatever that is, you know, and learn from the lessons of, you know, people before us, which is the past. We shouldn't have to repeat it again. So just back to the whole point of, I think we can learn without experimentation when it comes to our future. I think the writing is already on the wall, and we have enough experiments in the past to teach us what happens if we don't change.
You know, we talk about our animal brain and our new way of thinking, and I find this very interesting because we've gone from Hawaii, and Hawaii took us, what Josephine just commented on, 9/11, and this takes me back to something that I've used in previous meetings, and our conversation comes around to this sort of this line of demarcation. Then we had the September 10th way of thinking, and we had the September 11th, September 12th way of thinking. But it is the nature of the human spirit, which is what we're up against, to apply this comforting balm to anything that is horrific or unthinkable. And we snap right back to that. We snapped right back in. Everybody in Hawaii breathed a huge sigh of relief when they found out there was no inbound missile, and they went right off again to the, you know, they weren't late for the luau that evening. Okay. After September 11th, we had endless expressions of unity at every church, everywhere, and that quickly went right back to love thy neighbor, went back to screw my neighbor if I can get away with it in our culture. It did. I mean, I personally, I don't support that, and I don't act that way. But this is what we're up against, because the nature of the human spirit is to say, okay, I'm not going to die today. I'm going to go on, and the world is not going to be obliterated. That's not going to happen. That's what we're up against.
There was also the Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, where something similar, where they had a television drama and they interrupted it like it was a news commercial, that we were being invaded by aliens, and people started jumping out of windows and disruption. And it's talked about. I don't know if any. I remember it being discussed. I don't know if I was around when it happened, but it hasn't made a it hasn't made a big impression on our culture as the other two things we've been talking about. So, all three are very dramatic incidents. And long term, there is some effect, but is there enough to really get people to change?
Well, how about that, Marilyn, in the sense that we were very prepared to accept and believe that we were being annihilated by Martians, but we won't accept and believe that we can be annihilated by ourselves in a hair trigger. It did, and what you're talking about happened on radio. It happened in 1938 on the Mercury Theater, and everybody believed it. Once again, this is back when we trusted the media to tell us the truth. There are wonderful pictures of farmers grimly sitting on their roofs with their shotguns across their knees, ready to take out the nearest Martian that landed. And this was in New Jersey. And my thought was, how would you tell the average Martian from somebody in New Jersey? I thought there might have been a problem there. But it did happen, and we accepted it. We believed it.
So scaring people doesn't seem to work. I think maybe we have enough defenses that we kind of shut that part of our brain down, and hopefully some sort of logic will work, but I'm not sure.
I guess I'm hearing, I'm not sure that it's not working. I think you can argue it's not working fast enough to meet this particular goal of this group. But, I think this stuff is all, this information is coming in, it is being absorbed, and it is being reacted to and adapted to. It does make it realistic. Why is it? I think back to, they say with, Reagan and Gorbachev, when they did decide to disarm nuclearly. And I think Don showed a YouTube of the guy who did a lot of the science that was thought to be persuasive to the political leaders of the time. And, it was incorporated. And I think those kinds of videos, they're not around anymore. They're not believed anymore. But, this idea of sort of saying, somebody saying that, well, we presented the data, we did some, it wasn't, we did some real studies, and here's what we find. You launch a bomb here, and here's the fallout, and here's what it occurs. And, to me, that is somewhat convincing. I mean, it doesn't cause me to drop everything, because, if you dropped everything when anybody says something terrible is going to happen, you wouldn't be able to do anything. There's a complete clutter of everybody's got something that's going to destroy you if you don't change it and see their way. But, by appealing to certain levels, I think, of, persuasion or, persuasive intellectual argument, you can start to have some level of influence. I think there's enough. I read an article this morning in the New York Times about fake news and about RT, which is, I guess, Russian television broadcasting that 5G, the new network standard, is causing cancer in children and has all kinds of horribles associated with it. And so there's a lot of people who are starting to doubt that. And it's a Russian channel, and it turns out that Russia is very much in favor of pushing 5G locally in their own country. And it's clearly a matter of, they've brought on some, people would argue with marginal or fake science, just to sow discord in, Western civilization, or in the other democracies or competing political systems. So that's the kind of thing, that people are using science for negative ways that are not helping us form adaptive behaviors, but they're actually trying to impede it and break us down. And so what do you do? There is elements of persuasion out there, and I think they are somewhat universal. But I think that you have to be much more wary in that education of learning about that story to me, or hearing about Hawaii, or hearing about things that are shaping the way that thoughts are formed about the world and how outcomes occur. That stuff is relevant, and
I don't know. Maybe we're learning that we can't that we can't sustain the shock value of anything. That shock seems to have a span somehow proportionate to its intensity, and it will wear off. And is there a way to galvanize thinking instead of shocking?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. It isn't just semantic. Galvanizing thinking, I think, is what we're trying to do here. And we're talking about how shocking doesn't work. I think there's a natural resistance to it.
Well, if you talk to kids when they're young enough, some of the things that I remember are things that I remember at my mother's knee, things that she said still come back and then direct some of my behavior today. So early education is important in terms of Mother's Day being today and parental influence. But again, you've got to get the parents to buy in before they'll teach it to their kids.
It's interesting that Josephine brings up the issue of sheep, like animals. Some esoteric philosophers by the name of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky have created this idea to kind of portray our situation. They describe a very powerful kind of a magician who raises sheep, and he raises these sheep, and he convinces them that he protects them, he feeds them, he takes care of them, and he is a benevolent father for these sheep. The bottom line, of course, is he's raising the sheep so he can eat them for his dinner plate. And he convinces them that when he slaughters them, that this is for their own good. They're sacrificing their life for their good. And the issue is, as it goes, the sheep, if they become aware of this, if they become aware of the true intent of their leader, should they try to get freedom and break away? See, the leader doesn't want to build a fence, it's too expensive, so instead he convinces them by his ideas, his views, that he's really a great, wonderful leader who's taking care of them, when in fact he's just raising them for their dinner table. And the question that comes up, is it best that the sheep stay uninformed, stay unconscious of all this, because at least they'll be happy during this time, and they're going to enjoy all the food and the other things that, because he's fattening them up, of course, he's protecting them? Or should they run away and take their risks going out ventured into this new land which they're not familiar with? And in a way, that's kind of the way we are. The sheep, just a little dog can bite the leg of one sheep, and the whole herd can be controlled. And that's basically the history of our history, is defined by a series of wars where usually a male leader, whether it's Hitler or whoever else, it's a series of male leaders who convince people that they're there to do good for their tribe. And the bottom line, of course, is that because we are born with this museum that has instinctively, through our DNA, convinced us that to do what we've done in the past is what's worked, having more powerful weapons. So we spent our energy going from sticks and stones, from teeth and muscles to sticks and stones and bows and arrows and guns. And now what's so different, the world is all of a sudden different because we have been able to learn by trial and error in the past. In the past, when people fight with sticks and stones or bombs that kill a few, both tribes usually survive, and wars have been the driver of evolution. The new technology is what takes over. The people who are the brightest, they take over the spoils, and so our technology grows, and we're continuing to learn. But Einstein said, this is no more. The trial and error, it's fine, as it was brought out. Yes, we do learn by trial and error. It's quite obvious. We learn to walk by trial and error. We make many mistakes. But what we don't realize, because of our habit, our inherited museum of DNA, that when it comes to nuclear weapons, there is no second chance. And unless we wake up, so who are the leaders? We are the ones. We are the new story is telling us we've been given this new Genie organ that can solve problems using imagination. And until we wake up to that, wake up and grow up and show up, clean up, as they say, wake up, clean up, show up, and make up, so that we can work together. And Einstein's message is the newer way of thinking is to teach ourselves where we cooperate for our mutual benefits instead of compete for limited resources. The message is that unless we can learn to develop, and this gets into the political area we talked about previously, unless we can learn to develop a democracy which is synergistic, where each tribe directs its energy for the benefit of the whole system, instead of capitalistic, where the end game is one tribe gets all the wealth and the others go bankrupt. But in the meanwhile, what happens, the larger group that's, when you have 2% or 5% of people own all the goods and the 90% are hungry and whatever, what often happens, the wealthy group gets overthrown. There's a rebellion, there's a war, and that's the history of our past. The leaders usually get defeated, as we've seen with Hitler and in Japan and so on. But the message is we can't continue to do that. But our emotion, we are so powerfully driven by our emotion, which says whatever worked in the past is what we have to do. Our animal brain is continually telling us, do what worked in the past because that's what was successful. And are we willing to leave our area of comfort, which is now we're having more power? So the answer we've come up with is mad. So the 9 countries make more and more bombs. That the result of 9/11 and the result of all of these things is we see male leaders telling us we've got to be more powerful. So our budget now is $1.2 trillion for war materials, and it's maybe a few $1 million, maybe $100 million for a peace center, a peace academy. And so we get back to this idea that males have muscles and they're designed to go for power, and we have subjugated women. Historically, what we've seen in the tribal way, what we've done with women, we've covered them up so that they can't be seen. We've sewed up their vulva and removed their clitoris so that they become property and chattel. And now all of a sudden we're beginning to realize that women are born unconditionally with unconditional love. They are born with the DNA that says it's your job to nourish the new life, to be procreative. And I know that that's an area that opens up a whole area of controversy, but there is a difference. We're much more alike. We're 98% more alike. We have the same number of arms. We have similar brains. We have similar organs and so on. But the one area that we're clearly different is in our masculine and feminine energy. And feminine energy has been pretty well directed towards procreation, to be available to nurture. The woman is equipped with breast and so on to nurture progeny. There's a reason for that, and the male has muscles to go ahead and fight and protect the progeny. So what do we learn? That's the idea of the new story. We can learn something from all this, and from it we can decide there's a new way of thinking that enables us to cooperate and be synergistic rather than capitalistic. But the way we're heading now is what we've established over a period of time. That's something to give a little thought to. I know it's a lot. There's a lot here to give up the way we've been thinking for 3.5 billion years than the way we've been taught. For the fact is, when we do learn not just by trial and error, but we also learn by imitation. We learn by role modeling or copying. We learn by blindly obeying what others tell us, and that's the issue. This group here, these people here, and other groups like us, are the advanced people. We're the leading edge who have the ability to come up with some new ideas, whereas 98% of our population is, as some of our leaders are telling, our most knowledgeable people are telling us, are still caught up in sort of waiting for somebody to tell them what the right thing is to do, rather than using this creative genie organ to say we've got to step out of our comfort zone, even though it's more comfortable to do what we did before. We need to try something else, like perhaps something as dramatic as kindness, unconditional love, and prevention. We're getting kind of late, so I'm sure you may have some thoughts, but share your last comments, please.
I wonder if what we're learning, well, a backtrack. I agree with Abhi, although this might be potentially the right track to retrain people, that it's too slow. And I think if we have a solution that we really know is too slow, are we being foolish to pursue that, that solution? If you're on the Titanic and it's sinking and you're bailing water with a spoon, you're right, you've got a viable solution, but it's too slow. It's not going to work, and you're going to sink and drown. And the person who continues bailing with the spoon, are they really the wise person? I guess I wonder if, changing the trajectory of this undertaking more towards faith, not necessarily invoking God, but more toward faith that there's a better way to accomplish what we want to accomplish, and to invoke people's faith and belief in that, not necessarily learn through experience or learn through doing their own, mind experiments. But I think history has taught us that you can motivate and change large groups of people's thinking and behavior very quickly based on faith, rather than experience, and rather than being compelled or forced. And from what a little bit about history that I know, faith is the only mechanism that I'm aware of that has the potential to change so many people relatively quickly, both their beliefs and their behavior, and wonder if there's a way we could explore that.
I'm just in relief to Pacey. I'm sort of viewing the idea of changing this at the global level is a daunting challenge. Pacey suggested maybe faith as opposed to persuasion. I'm kind of thinking more of, if you talk about individuals, how do you make individuals happy? And then happy individuals may evolve more quickly than ones that are not happy with themselves. And that's where I think that this approach of how do you change people at the local level, to me, has a little more currency. If you tell somebody, do you like being, not happy with yourself or depressed, and, this is a way of looking at your life and things that is a little more constructive. And the result of that is that you're maybe a little less likely to be brutal to your neighbor. And that kind of something that bubbles up from the bottom up. That to me is more of a practical path forward, where you're not bumping up against so many different opinions and so many different, the clutter of everybody has their best way that everybody else should live. If you approach people and say, well, here's something that you individually can use that might improve your lot, you can take it or leave it, you can try it or not, and it hopefully shows its value intrinsically right away. And if it does have some sort of benefit, it will probably be reinforced and probably grow. Um, and is that to me is a path that to me is a little less of a minefield, or a little less challenging on what you'd have to overcome to actually change some folks' minds.
I agree with you. I mean, actually both of you, and I don't.
You don't agree with as often?
No. I was going to say I don't think there's a one path forward, right? Why not do the spoon? Why not do, everything we've talked about? I think we don't need to change everybody's mind. We need to change the right people's minds, right? I think, and I do think the small group approach locally is gonna, it's going to be quite effective. So it's good to see the groups are going to start soon. But I think and this is more to Don. I think it's the right people's minds, and how do we get those voices singing this kind of song? And it doesn't have to be exactly the same song, but just close enough so that we're changing people's minds to this newer way of thinking.
Well, we have a model, I think. The issue is the message that we're getting is that from the most knowledgeable peoples, we don't have too much time. It is like the sinking ship, and that's why the pessimists in this world are saying it's already too late, so why even bother? So let's borrow money, let's forget about your retirement program, live it up now. And that's why most people are going in debt, and our country is going more and more in debt. And you say, we have to live for today because there won't be any tomorrow. So to borrow as much money as we can and spend it while we can. And that's sort of the pessimist point of view. But I think the more realistic and optimist point of view, if there is a small chance we can make a change, we really need to try to take that change, because we do have loved ones that we care about. We want our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren to have the opportunities that we've experienced. And the model we have is Alcoholics Anonymous. They have, through two drunk men, they started a movement that, like lightning, that traveled around the world, and now you can have these groups around the possibility. So the hope that I'm introducing and we're introducing here is that we now have the technology, we have the ability to have people participate in small groups and start growing small groups very rapidly around the world. If we can get a movement going around the world where people begin to share their ideas and use their creative genius, we are the ones. We're not the only people who are interested in peace and happiness and love. There are people all over the world now that are waking up. And if we can reach those people and bring them together, and we have this technology, and we've recently got this most marvelous opportunity to be granted 50 licenses from Zoom, our modern technology now, that we can spread groups very rapidly. So that's where I see the hope. We are the hope. We are the potential leaders. You say, who are the potential leaders? There are people like us who have had the opportunity to have an education to use words and language and develop a newer way of thinking that enables us to think forward and not just continue to do what we did in the past. What we did in the past was was fight or flight. What we did in the past was to when we needed something, we did it by essentially taking from other people and thinking of what's good for me and my family. That's the meme that's governed us. Now we have the ability to, it's a jump to go from what's good for my tribe and your tribe. It's very difficult to say, forget about my suitcases and so on. I got to get out of here because there are people behind me who also want to live. It's very difficult, all of a sudden we're willing to give up the things when we're confronted with, it's our life at stake. It's not just, how much, whether we're going to have an extra quart of milk or not on the table. So I think we're on the right track. I think we're on the right track here, but we've got to be aware of it. But we are addicted. We don't like to think that we're addicted to a way of thinking which is not particularly healthy. That says what's good for me and my tribe for here and now. But if we really can be honest with ourselves, generally that's the way most of the world is today. It's the way most countries are. That's the way most religions are still. You know, the religions are changing. They've been helpful, but religions have traditionally said, what's good for my religion and screw your religion. You know, and we're still kind of practicing a good bit of that.
Hmm.
We preach the good news. You see, we can preach the good news, but we haven't been teaching it. There's a difference between preaching and teaching. And so we haven't developed, we're just told by Einstein, we've got to have this new way of thinking. We need the new language. But what I'm saying to you all is we have the new language. We just have to start putting it into practice. Unless you really learn these 7 word switches and really you less practice these 2 love creation skills, love myself with the abundance that overflows to enrich others. That's the new version of the golden rule. Love myself with the abundance that overflows to enrich others. Most people don't love themselves that way. Most people have the idea that, you know, when you look in the mirror, you don't say, you're more likely to look at that still the old pattern of you look at the negative things. What's wrong? What's wrong with the world, not what's right with the world. And that's where we're stuck. And I think we can wake ourselves up. As people say, wake up, clean up, make up, and then wise up. And then we'll have a synergistic society where we all work for the benefit of the whole system rather than just for my family or my tribe, my religion, my political party. That's where we are today.
And beat up your enemies.
Meet up your energies and be helpful, be kind. You know, we're having this kindness movement. Be kind to yourself so you can be kind to others. Love yourself with the abundance so you can love others, instead of being concerned that you have to get your religion, your tribe, your political party has to win no matter what. That's where we are today, and we realize it, but we're so caught up in our emotions. This meme that we've had for so long, what's good for me and my family for here and now. If you just give a little thought to that, changing that one sentence would change everything dramatically, but we're not willing to do that. We're so caught up with what's good. How can we get to that point? That's the real issue. Can we get to the point, what's good for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future? That sentence simply says, how do we use our energy to work together? There's no issue of who's right or who's wrong, who's good or bad, and so on. Well, we're well over, and I hope at least these thoughts will get us thinking a little bit more, and we can continue to. We have this. We're in a marvelous position now. I can't not express how important it is. I think that we've been able to, with a little help from Josephine, to get these 50 links, free links to encourage groups, and that I think we're leading the way here. We are the people that can make a difference. You know, who are the leaders? Do you expect Trump to be to change us? Is it? Can you think of the leaders that are available now that are basically having any answer? The leaders that we have today are saying, make more weapons. All 9 countries that have the power are saying, use our power, not to prevent their use. They're saying, let's use it so that we can be stronger and conquer the other nations. Or at least this false idea that as long as we have weapons, nobody will bother to attack us. And that'll work for a little while. But we've said that a mechanical error or just one aberrant person who has the ability to crack the code and find and get into the button or whatever, it'll be all over. And the experts are telling us that can happen in Hawaii. There was a false alarm, but it could happen. The real alarm could be any moment. But the experts are saying it's certainly going to happen within 10 years or 5 years or less, unless we teach ourselves to think differently, where we have a synergistic approach where we're helping one another rather than spending our energy to say, how can we make more money? I mean, when the idea, remember the help skills, is when you have enough, you have enough. You know, if you have $300 million or $20 billion as our billionaires are finding now. That's why I think we're seeing people like Bill Gates and other people who have billions are now saying, how can we use our money now to benefit the world? You know, and are asking other billionaires to say, can we use some of that wealth to distribute it to change the world? And yes, if we can eliminate measles and polio and so on, that will help. But that in itself is not going to stop. It's not going to stop global warming. It's not going to stop the bomb. So we've got to find a way to do that, and that way is a newer way of thinking. And until we develop this new vocabulary and new language, we're stuck with what's good for my flag and what's good for my particular political party, and so on. That's what we're seeing with our leaders. Well, I really have to end the meeting. I appreciate your willingness to stay a little longer, and I appreciate your tolerating my dictatorial sense of taking more than my 2 minutes. And so, and I realize that, but I think there's just some ideas that I'm trying to plant here that will hopefully, because I really believe that the people in this group are the answers, and people are groups like us, and we have the ability, this marvelous ability, if we play our cards right, to start a movement, a million-member movement, as Neil Donald Walsh said, a movement that can wake us up to the addiction that we don't realize we have. So thank you all, and we'll continue in our meeting. We'll look forward to seeing you at the next week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
So long. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Josephine said that she cannot wait for the business meeting.
I'll call her. My dad stays on this, so.
Okay, so where do we stand here now with our plan to move ahead? Welcome, Rainey. Rainey, you are the genius who's helping us with the most important kind of short messages that will get people to come to our meeting. So, do you have any new brilliant ideas for us?
So currently I've just edited and implemented the changes that Josephine had mentioned, and I have emailed it to our meeting group here. So if everyone can just have a look at it.
Really, can you show it once? And
Yeah.
I also sent a reply to that. Can you upload it directly on, that's a short video, right? I'm hoping you can directly upload it on YouTube, wherever our channel is. I've created a separate playlist for those videos.
Sure, I'll add that. So anyways, I have emailed it to everyone here. However, I'll just share my screen and show it once again.
Yeah, why I'm saying is Don has not opened his email box, Outlook. So now if you open it, it will take 5 minutes for all the emails to come in. So
okay.
Yeah.
Welcome. You have come to the educational community, guaranteed forever free websites. You will learn to be happier, more loving, and make your life really significant beyond your imagination. We do this by solving the biggest puzzle. Why is it that we fill our world with fear, scarcity, hate, and war when we want and need help? The acronym for happiness, enough, love, and peace. Solving this puzzle will make our world the happy, loving, safe home we want for our children, additional loved ones, and humanity. Make today's dreams tomorrow's reality. Here's the deal. An exciting new method of lifelong education, Genie seminars, will make you a source of the solution instead of a part of the problem. Enjoy camaraderie, fun, and share emotional support with others as you learn the wisdom of world-class thought leaders and co-create with others in virtual seminars to spread the 4 help ingredients: happiness, enough, love, peace. As you help yourself, you simultaneously help our planet. Genie seminars are the fastest, easiest, most enjoyable, and effective call to action to proceed to succeed. Begin by learning the two most powerful, yet still relatively secret, love creation skills that teach the modern version of the golden rule: love myself with the abundance that overflows to enrich my loved ones and humanity. Then learn 7 word switches, i.e., simple word changes that free your creative thinking from instinct and tradition to become your own person. As your experience of help, happiness, enough, love, and peace grows, you'll want to pay a new way of thinking forward to family, friends, and contacts with a click on your computer. When they thank you, ask them to do what you did. Each Reach One, Teach Many teacher, that is, you, can start a domino effect that will circle the world. A 1 million-member movement of Einstein's World Peace Army is sufficient to teach the newer way of thinking to our 7+ billion world citizens. Are you ready to make a difference? Click www.peace.academy to get started. Begin by learning the 7+2 formula. Do you want to go deeper? Then click to enjoy Genie's seminars for lifelong education in the universal skills that make our world the happy, loving home we want and need. Enjoy 4 free books that update the story of us to identify our higher purpose. We are humane becomings in the process of elevating ourselves to higher levels of moral, spiritual fulfillment. I encourage you to go to www.peace.academy and start your lifelong education in the skills that matter.
Perfect.
I think that's brilliant.
That's perfect.
I think it's a
Wow.
really, I think
Thank
it's
you.
really a tribute to a team working together. You know, we have the creativity of the animation, the content. You know, the uh,
Voice.
the voice that is easy to listen to, and the technology to put it all together. You know, I think it's just a tribute to how we've been able to put this all together, and I think it's just wonderful from my point of view. Do others have any others? I mean, how do you all feel about it? Do you agree or?
Great. Looked like I assumed a slightly different shape at the beginning of it. I look a little bit like a chicklet.
I think this is perfect. I don't think there is, at least for me, there is no need to do anything further. You can simply upload it on YouTube, and Basu, you can, I think, make it available on peace.academy. And then once you have made it available on peace.academy, Basu, maybe you can share it with our group and give them 1 week to go and look at it and share their thoughts. And Dawn, maybe we can, take the first 15 minutes next week to just walk through the website with others. Okay?
So, will Rini give us the URL, or you are like doing it? Like, I just need the link of the YouTube video. I will replace it.
Okay, Rini, will it be faster for you, or do you want me to do it?
I've sent it to all 4 of us.
Please.
So,
Please do.
I have already done that. I think around half an hour or 15 minutes back. So I was also hoping that Josephine would be here. If everything is fine, then it's both of either ways it's fine. Either you upload it.
I'm doing it now. While we are in this meeting, I will do it so that. Okay, so Basu, I also thought that we were supposed to. No, I remember one thing is we were. You had said that there were a lot of folks who will join the. Who have shown interest in Genie seminar, right?
Yes. We had seen the list when I was there. I think there were some 20.
I thought you were supposed to create some kind of an email to send to them. Remember? Can you add it to your notes for this week? You said that you wanted to send an email to them, inviting them for a Zoom call with you. So, and based on the response that we receive from those folks, we will set up a Genie seminar with them.
Yeah, what I've been working on is a very important I've been working on two other things.
Congratulations. By coming to www.
Yeah, I've been working on two other very important things. One is what have we talked about today, the idea of creating a new vocabulary as something to send out to people, and particularly people like Jack Canfield and others, to get them more involved. And then when you came here, I started to show you, I wanted to change the introduction to the 7 word switches. The 7+2 formula, that's an older one. And as you suggested, we need to get it down to maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And I've been working on it to get it down. I've got it down to about 5 or 6 minutes. And I think I have an idea how to go ahead further, but I'm going to send that out to everybody for comments, but I think that's a critical thing. And then I think I think I can get some people from this, from Barbara Marks Hubbard's group who are interested in starting some seminars.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the next thing. I'm just about a week or two behind, but I've really been pushing myself here to try to express my ideas in a way that are understandable. I think I have the intuition of where we're heading, need to go, but I don't have the words to say them properly. For example, I think what Genie has done with the cartoon has done a very good job, better than I've done in expressing it and God's voice. But I'm sort of struggling as the content creator to get it all together in a way that makes sense. And so I think hopefully within this week I can accomplish an invitation and get maybe that 3 minute introduction to the 7+2 formula.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So once you are done with the 3-minute introduction, maybe you can share it with Josephine. So because she wanted to look at it before we start recording it. Then the question comes is whether we take a video of you recording it, or do you want to give it to Brad?
Now I'm going to make a recording of it, and then I'll give it to Brad, and I'll give it to him with the script, so he can make it, and he will be doing the recording.
And then how will it be presented? It will be presented in an audio or a video?
Well, it'll be presented as it is right now. I mean, right now there's a voice that's presenting it, but if Rini can make a cartoon of it, I mean, which she's done with the other things, Brad does the speaking, and instead of having a talking head or I mean, the other possibility is you have the on the screen the writing. I think it's helpful. Instead of a talking head, I think it's more helpful if people hear it and see it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
If you have two sensory modalities that you're getting at the same time, if they can hear somebody saying it and they can see it on the screen, it's more powerful than just hearing somebody.
Yeah. Okay. So So once you are done, maybe then you can do. And in the meanwhile, if you can draft that email and send that email to those folks who have shown interest, because it is 1 month, I think, since Basu left. So we have to, if you send that draft to Basu, then he will take the ownership of sending an email to them, tracking them, and finding out who is interested in a Genie seminar, in hosting a Genie seminar. And once he has that list, we will set up a meeting with that list of folks.
See, when we send it to anybody that's interested, I think when we send it out, I would probably send it with that 3-minute introduction we just heard, or maybe with a 1-minute cartoon, or maybe both of them.
So why don't you draft it? The best course of action is, you don't worry about how Basu tracks them and all those things, or how Basu gets the information. You simply draft an email to Basu as if you're drafting to them, and Basu will handle the rest, is what he said.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that I think part of my message will include the cartoon or two.
Yeah, can you add it to your to-do list of somewhere so that you remember, or you will remember it?
No,
right?
Okay. I haven't forgotten. It's just that I put it like number 3 on the priority, and I've been stuck for about the last 6 weeks since my cruise with Jack Canfield. What I realized, I think I personally think I've come to my most important insight, or the best thing that I've ever done, is to come up with an understanding and an intuition of what it is that we need to do to change the way we think. And that is what I introduced at the meeting today in a sort of a crude way. We really have to teach people the new language, we have to teach. I've created a vocabulary of about 60 or 70 words and expressions. And if we can teach these new words, starting with the 7+2 formula, that's what really changes our emotion to a more rational thinking. We've got to get over this business that we're such emotional animals that even if we understand that it's a good idea to save money rather than spend it, that we still want to borrow money if we can, and get into debt if we can enjoy things right now, or we want to, you know, even though we realize this is going to may lead us to an early heart attack or something, it doesn't matter if we still prefer to do things that really we have a slight intellectual understanding they're not good for us, but we act according to our old instinct anyway. And it's that idea that the only way we can change that is we've got to develop this new language, because our old language, the one that we've been using, is the one that causes the problem.
Okay, so I think all of our tasks are cut out then. Basu, you have to upload that to the website and share it with the group so they have time, and you have to be prepared to walk through the website next Sunday when we meet with the group.
So you can just show the website to Don now. Maybe you can open and share. I'll just show you one or two more sections.
Okay. You showed it last week. I thought we had gone through it. Okay. Basu?
Yeah, so just go to About Us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and click on Conversations.
Oh, wow. This is nice. Okay. So we have it now.
You can just explain, Don, what it is.
No, I understood. So this is basically what we have on the other website. You have brought it here. So now folks have the ability to come to the website and add a comment. And that add a comment they can do via Facebook and all those things. So it is nice. It will help not only them sharing their comments, which could be invaluable to us. It could also allow us to make it viral by when they comment through Facebook. Okay, Don?
I think it's going to be great. Yeah, good job, Basu.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Basu?
Yeah, so that part is done, and some also click on that educational content. So here we will need the course checklist and assessment. I think something we had discussed, and I think you were working with Don also. You had created some document, but the final versions are required.
Yeah, so that I think we'll wait for Dawn to complete his other stuff. I thought we had sent something to Josephine on that, and she was working on that. But we'll wait for Dawn. You already have 2 or 3 big things to do. I also wanted to meet you about something, but today is Mother's Day, so I have to jump ship now. But what I'll do is this week is very busy for me, but we are going out also for a family vacation on Thursday. But once I come back, we will meet probably. Are you available next Sunday in the afternoon or evening? We will probably.
I should be.
Yeah. Okay.
I have lots of time, but my issue is, apart from my writing, I'm involved with so many group meetings now. I've signed up for so many meetings, and I hardly have time to spend time with Marilyn. because usually the meetings come up in the evening now, and there are a lot of things going on. Right now, for example, maybe I'll send this, somebody who's regarded as the most important philosopher in the world is giving 7 free talks, for example, and I'm going to sign up for them. But a lot of what he's saying is based on this idea of the new story. His philosophy is essentially one that we've come through different eras of the different places in the past, and now we're at a point where we have to move forward because we can understand from what the past. A lot of what we've been talking about today, and he's generally regarded by people who like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who's very creative. But he, like Barbara Marx Hubbard, have not come up with any solution. They just say this is the problem, and we can do something about it.
Yeah. I need to leave now because Pratima, I don't want Pratima to kick me out of the house. I'm sure Basu also is facing the same situation.
So
we'll meet.
Sarath, that is fine. Just last thing, you just check that, and maybe later on you can discuss with Don. Let me know. So in that same website, under the educational content, there is free book and guide. You can just check if the links, what should be the right links. Go to in the menu, educational content, on the fixed menu, yeah. And there is read the guide and free course. Those two also, what should be the right link that we need to just check.
Okay, so you have something there and you want me to look at it?
Yeah, we want to see that if this is the correct version and something, we need to change.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I think we're, I like the way this seems to be flowing now, when people come to the website. I think it looks like it'll be less confusing, and the whole guy is how can we make it as easy as possible.
So instead of you reviewing what they have put, can you tell them what is the guide and free course, whatever document you have, maybe, and I've uploaded them. I'm showing them here, so they are here. Don, you see this one? You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, I got it from here and I put it here. So this is the guide to free course. Everything is showing guide to free course only. So you have to provide the guide and the free course to Vasu, and he will upload it. At least what you do is you review the guide.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Basu, I think next week Josephine will be available. So we'll probably have an extended, or not next week. Next week I'm not available. The following week, what we'll do is we'll have an extended meeting, or maybe Don, we need to think about, because what we are doing is we are clubbing these 2 meetings together. So, anyone who is attending a 1.5 hour our Genie seminar and then this meeting, maybe we can rethink about, changing this meeting. So
Sharath, for next week, like maybe we can reschedule for some other day, because you are also not there.
Yeah.
And actually, my son and I have birthday on that day. So
oh yeah.
So
yeah, it is your birthday, I remember. Okay.
So that's why we can do it on another weekday, or whenever Don is free. Instead of Sunday, we can do it on another day.
Yeah. So let me do one thing, Don. When I'm going right, I'll start an email chain with Josephine and Brad. We can all 5 of us, we can decide which is the other day, and we could probably do at 9 o'clock in the evening our time, Basu, so that it is like it's not very good for you, but it is not very bad also, Basu. Okay.
Well, if you come back to this country, Basu, we can go to Pintu's.
It's a long way to go for a meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a good meal.
Yeah.
Maybe we have to all go to India.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. So we can I'll start that email chain and we'll probably meet one of the weekdays. No.
Well, let me just before we. I doubt if Josephine is going to be available during a weekday, maybe. But what about Saturday? Is Saturday usually a time that people don't have a work day?
Saturday, what happens? Don, house cleaning, all those things, and then Saturday is like more like, because I come here on Sundays. Saturday will be really tough. But one thing, Josephine might not be available during the morning hours. I'm talking about evening hours, like 9 o'clock.
Why don't you see? You're talking about for next Sunday.
Yes.
Okay. Well, why don't you start see if you know, we know that Basu and you are not going to be available next Sunday, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it might be that if we cannot find another time that's convenient, then we'll just have to skip the business meeting then. I don't
Agree.
think we can have a business meeting, or maybe just Josephine and I can meet or something.
Agree. You can meet, but what I'm saying is maybe we can find an alternate day where Josephine and Brad both are available, and all of us can meet.
Okay, well, if we can do that, fine. Otherwise, we'll just plan to have the Sunday meeting without you.
Okay.
Without you, and I mean, there's always important issues that we, you know, to try to refine our program.
Agree.
I mean, there's certainly things I would like to talk directly with Josephine and directly with Brad, and so that might provide us an opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else anybody needs to bring up now?
No, I think we're all set.
Okay, I think we're really moving along well here. I'm seeing lots of good possibilities, and I'm doing a lot of things that I haven't discussed with you. For example, with this with Barbara Marx Hubbard's group, that now that she died, there's a group of very dedicated people, about 20 people, who, when we have a meeting, which is a little like a Genie seminar, to get together, they don't even want to end the meeting. Everybody's so committed to the meeting. And there's some people from New Zealand and Australia and Germany, and I mean, some people, widespread individuals. So okay, so very good.
So Basu, tomorrow night, Pintu, are you in?
Yes. Let's do
Good.
it.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good day, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye, Rini.
Bye.
Oh, thank you.
You know, we never stopped the recording.
We didn't. I will edit it. There is a way to edit it, I think. Just end the meeting. End the
And the
there. You know, I was thinking when we were talking